Brothers and sisters, friends, I feel privileged to be here tonight at the presentation of this book about the history of our church, 300 years of Russian Orthodox Church in London. Any church, any parish, in any place in the world has its own character. Naturally, a parish which exists outside its own national, cultural environment has very specific problems, faces many problems which other parishes in their historical environments do not have. We can follow up on this upon the reading the material that Father Christopher has gathered. I think it is a great event to have this book really in front of us. I have followed the existence or the development of this book for 2 centuries, I believe. It's people probably say 2 decades, but it seems to me 2 centuries. It has a long way of development, and I'm glad that Father Christopher finally managed to bring it into our hands. I'm very sorry that Father Christopher is not here among us today, and I would say naturally my great gratitude towards Father Christopher, who has done all this work, but I would also like to thank Nicolas Mabin for the tremendous work that he has put into it, into the last portion of the book, which could not have come into existence without his help. This is a tremendous support that he has given to Father Christopher and to the publishers. Any Christian parish is in the first place a part and the entirety of the body of Christ. Therefore, any book that is written about such a parish can only do a bit of scratching on the external the external portion of it. Therefore, naturally, the history which we will read will only reflect the light that is inside. In order to understand it, we have to be there, we have to pray. And I hope that all of you will take this into consideration when you will read this book. I wish you success in this evening and in the reading of this very interesting history.
Thank you very much. Your Grace, fathers, brothers and sisters, friends, when I first saw an advance copy of Father Christopher Birchall's book, I thought at once to myself, this is the book that I've been waiting for all my life, that will tell me all the things I wanted to know about the life of the Russian Church in Great Britain. And so, having received his book and now have the chance when I go home to read it, I feel, well, I will have achieved the ambition of my life and I can move on to another place. Also, I've never before been able to see the interior of the former Russian chapel here. So this is another ambition fulfilled. I haven't yet had time to read Father Christopher's book in detail, but I did immediately look at the account of the Russian Church during the 50s and 60s, the period when I was first coming into contact with the Orthodox Church. First, the description of St. Philip's, Buckingham Palace Road, and then the account of the worshipping community in Emperor's Gate. I'm delighted also by the way the book is illustrated by pictures, and there I saw the person I remember very clearly, Vladika Nikodim of the Russian community, who celebrated the Divine Liturgy most beautifully. And there he was, exactly as I remember him in Emperor's Gate. I'm waiting now to read the earlier part of the book. I too have looked at the records in the archives of the Russian community from the 18th century onwards, and have found very interesting things there. Father Christopher's book is clearly based on wide and careful research, and I also find that it is written in a lively style. So he has made a notable contribution to our knowledge of orthodoxy in Great Britain. And I commend the book most warmly to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's not uncommon for Orthodox parishes to mark a milestone year to put out a commemorative booklet. Often these have plenty of glossy pictures, but not really a substantive historical narrative. Why did this parish deserve more?
Of course, I don't know, but I suspect that this is unique, that you have a parish with a history that goes back so long and has been through so many changes, which reflected historical circumstances. So, of the emigration, we're unusual in having such a long history. Most of the emigration parishes began, of course, after the Revolution, but not necessarily had a history before the Revolution. And so, to that extent, we're unique, or possibly almost unique. It started off, I rather suspect, if I remember correctly, as Vladika says, it's 25 years since the idea was first mooted. It was originally to celebrate the baptism of Russia in 1988. I suspect the idea was to do a commemorative booklet. But I think when Father Christopher was overwhelmed with a huge amount of material, both given to him by various parishioners and his own discoveries, that he realized that there was something much more substantial to be written and indeed to be recorded. Because, of course, in the process, unfortunately, that whole generation who were part of the parish in the sort of from the 30s onwards, we're beginning to lose them, and most of them have gone before us. And he has captured that memory, and it's particularly valuable.
Nicholas Chapman, when you received the manuscript, knowing that it was going to be quite a daunting project, and in its final form it's quite large, it's going to be quite daunting for the average reader. So is this a book that the lay reader, if I can use that term in both an ecclesiastical sense and a historical sense, scholarly sense, can be edified by?
I think it is, and somebody who reviewed the book for us in America came up with a very nice turn of phrase. He said that Father Christopher had presented an iconic approach to history. And I might add to that and say, in a way, this book is a serial biography. And people are interested in people, and there are so many different people who come into this book who all deserve their own full biographies, and I sincerely hope some of them will be written. And that, I think, is what makes this a very easy text for anybody who likes to read, to engage with. It is substantive, but the initial feedback is I can't put this book down, which is about the nicest feedback a publisher can have.
I felt reading this book that one of the main themes, like you said, a serial biography, was the characters and the roles played by the pastors throughout the centuries of the church. Father Jakob Cheremeteff at one point becomes the senior representative of the Russian government when the embassy is closed for a short period. There's an earlier priest who was sent partly as the pastor for the parish and partly as an agricultural expert to glean what he could from the agricultural revolution coming here. What other themes did you find particularly fascinating? And this is, I think, for both of you.
Yeah, I think certainly one of the, I think maybe two things I'll mention. I think it's very important because, again, I said this in Oxford on Sunday, I'm not aware of any other book in the English language, and of course I stand to be corrected, that give continuous narrative of 3 centuries of Orthodox history in the West. And whilst this is a history of the Church in London, in many ways it is also a history of Orthodoxy in the West, because there's this constant interaction with other places. So that's the one thing. And then another theme I think I would draw attention to is the relationship between the Orthodox and the Anglican churches, which is a continual and a recurrent theme. And you'll find in one of the appendixes to the book the guidance of Metropolitan Philaret regarding dealings with the Anglican Church, for example, which is not, I don't think, previously been published in English. And that's obviously a theme that hasn't, a story that hasn't finished, as it were.
Yeah, I think Father Christopher has been very good in highlighting lay people as well as clergy. I think when you're writing the history of a parish, there's a temptation just to write it purely about the pastors, which of course is interesting, but it's also equally interesting to know about the people. And so there are extensive biographies of people like Gerald Palmer, Galina von Meck, and numerous other lay people who were a vital part of the parish. And I think that's part of the success. I was also helping Father Christopher to choose photographs. We have a large collection of photographs, and it was really quite difficult to limit to the number that made sense. And I was always very keen, wherever possible, to have photographs of lay people as well as of the clergy.
Once again, for Nicolas Mabin, as a long-time member of the parish, why was it so important for you, and maybe speaking for the parish community as a whole, that this project come to fruition? Why did it die at some point over the 28-year process?
I don't think I'm the right person to answer that, but maybe I'm stubborn. And at the point where we discussed it in 2009, having heard about this book for decades before, I said, well, I've retired, let me help you. I've got time to help you. So I think persistence. But it was important to capture the history of the parish, which, as I said, before the new emigration, if we think of the emigration of Russians coming or Slavs coming after the year 2000, of course our church has been transformed. But none of them have the memory of what went before them. And I think it's a strong Orthodox tradition to remember your fathers, and this was a way of doing so.
One more question for Nicolas Mabin. One of the struggles of the church abroad as a whole has been the shift from being a church of emigres, of refugees, to a community of people who are, for better or worse, settled in the West. How has that affected this particular parish, and how is that reflected in the book?
I think it's true to say that as the emigres settled down and became more anglicised, and their children became more and more anglicised, we actually lost several generations, and very few of the children of the first emigration, the second emigration, very few have stayed in the church. And which is true to say that particularly in the 90s, we were getting smaller and smaller and smaller. but by the grace of God, we have this new influx of members. But it is true to say, and I think this is a real challenge for this generation, to think very carefully, how are we not going to lose another generation of Orthodox? Our children come to church now, but as they grow up, they will want to identify as being English. And if you're English, well, you're not Orthodox, and they tend to go away from it. And the challenge is really to hold on to those children and keep them on the right path, and that's really tough.
Now, Nicholas Chapman, you're engaged in quite a daunting research project of your own, which coincidentally is touched upon by this history. Talk a little bit about that and about how this book and Father Christopher's work affects or complements your own.
At the risk of anticipating the next question, I've been engaged in developing a story which I first became aware of in 2008, and so when this manuscript landed on my desk, it was 4 years after I'd already begun. So, and this is the story of Philip Ludwell III of Williamsburg, Virginia, who has a short part in the book and who Metropolitan Kallistos encountered, I know, in the archives of the church many years ago as well. And in a sense, I think this to me illustrates how much I hope this book will be a springboard for vastly more work, because although this is a 700 plus page book, I think there could be 7,000 pages quite easily written from it. And I am engaged in writing a book. I've done a lot of research. This book gives me one fact I didn't have about the Ludwell family, but I've discovered essentially a community of Orthodox meeting in Virginia from at least 1738 to 1822, who are descendants and connected to Philip Ludwell. And there are many other connections. I'm a member of something called the Society for Orthodox History in the Americas, and there are many, many other connections with the genesis of Orthodoxy in the United States that really come through this parish. And again, going into the middle of the 19th century, again, somebody else has to write another book about that. So, and I'm absolutely convinced, as I said, there could be many biographies spun from this book. We're a naturally ahistorical people, sadly, today, and we tend to assume that what we know in our own life is typical of all other times. And I think often when we start to look at the primary documents, we come up with a very different impression. So just to leave one example of that, something that I've heard said both in America and in Britain is the Orthodox Church is the best kept secret. And I now believe that it was actually much better known in 1760, for example, than it is today.
Thank you. Well, thank you both, and thank you for bringing at least this part of the history of the Orthodox Church back into the light.
If we can remain where we're seated, I'm going to turn the tables now on Father Peter. I mentioned biographies coming from this book, and one person who features very strongly in the book in the middle of the 20th century and who is well known to Metropolitan Kallistos is Father George Cheremeteff, who was a priest who served in the parish, and Father George was also the great-grandfather of Father Peter. So I'd like to invite Father Peter briefly to share some further recollections from his family and otherwise of his great-grandfather, who I'm sure was probably also known to some other people present tonight.
Count George Alexandrovich Cheremeteff was born in St. Petersburg in 1887 into one of the wealthiest families in Russia at the time. He would, in much later circumstances, much different circumstances, recall trips on the family yacht from St. Petersburg to England to call on Her Majesty Queen Victoria. He followed in his family footsteps. They were of high military stature. He joined the Cavalier Guard and served alongside his men through World War I until the revolution led to the breakdown of the regiment. And Georg Aleksandrovich would recall later how saddening it was for him that these men of good peasant stock, of good training, how quickly they turned away from their duty to their country and their love for their country. At first, Father George fled to the Caucasus, sensing in some way the irreversibility, the irreversible nature of the revolution. But when a regiment was formed in Crimea to attempt at least to fight the Red Army, he joined them. At one point he was taken captive and led away to be executed. One of the men, one of his captors, happened to have been one of his last recruits that he trained. And in anger, he lashed out at Georg Aleksandrovich, beating him, calling him all sorts of names, you rich bourgeois, and so, and beat him to the point of unconsciousness. When Georg Aleksandrovich came to, he found himself abandoned, with no one around. And in this way, his life was saved. He made his way to Italy, where he was reunited with his family, and eventually they settled in France. In the 1930s, Georg Aleksandrovich was widowed, and following World War II, he was told by then Archbishop John of Western Europe, who was later glorified as Saint John, that his wife was dead, his children were grown, the country to which he had given an oath was gone. The only thing left was to serve God and the people. So Georg Aleksandrovich was ordained in quick succession to the diaconate and priesthood, and he served in the various displaced persons camps in Germany, especially in Fischbeck. And here he showed the great pastoral qualities that led the people to admire and love him to a very great degree. These were especially generosity to the point of self-denial, and a sense of humor that was able to cut through even the firmest, even the strongest of defenses built up by these people who had lived through so many terrible experiences. One anecdote that is given in this book from a later time when he was in London illustrates his humor. He was traveling on a train to visit some parishioners, and some young men were on the same trains and scoffed at him in his cassock, asked him what his name was. And Father George answered, Father George. The men quoted at him the scriptures, the commands of Christ, call no man father. So he answered, then don't call me father, call me dad. This led to a long conversation until the riot ended. I won't speak much of Father George's time in London, as there are those who knew him and who regarded him as their spiritual father. But I'd like to end with Father George's own words, which were written to his son as a testament. He wrote that the only nobility that matters is the nobility of the soul. And if a man is born with a noble name, a noble title, this alone does not make him noble. Rather, it only lays upon him a requirement to, with all his words and deeds, uphold and honor the name of his ancestors. And he whose deeds are noble is, in fact, noble. And I think Father George, as well as many other of the faithful and the clergy whose lives are described in this book, very much upheld this testament, this this belief and this principle.
Thank you very much.